Good evening. We have a full house. It's time to call to order the Board of Trustees of Lamar CISD Independent School District regular meeting this February 20th, 2020. This is our regular monthly board meeting, and we have a quorum with all members present. We will open the meeting with our traditional moment of silence for you to observe as you feel appropriate. Please stand and join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Dr. Randall, we have student reports.
Yes, ma'am, Madam President, we do.
Good evening, members of the Board of Trustees. Dr. Randall. We have with us tonight students from Terry High School and George Ranch High School. These students had the opportunity to visit China in December as part of our student exchange program, and they are here tonight to talk to you about their learning experience. I'm going to call on Mr. Quer to introduce the group that we have.
Thank you, Dr. Osagi, and also thank you, members of the board and Dr. Randall. As he said, I'm Chris Quer, one of the assistant principals at George Ranch, and this is just a small amount of the students that was able to travel with us in December this past year. We had 20 total students from George Ranch and Terry that went with us to Foshan, China, and they had an amazing cultural immersion experience. And so we have Ashlyn Cassidy from Terry High School, Jonathan Klein from George Ranch, and Luana Bezeo Gandor, also from George Ranch. And then you're also going to hear briefly from Miss Wright, who traveled with us. She's one of our algebra teachers. So I'll welcome Ashlyn first.
Hello, I'm Ashlyn, and I'm the one student from Terry High School that got to attend the Foshan, China trip. It was such a pleasure, so I want to personally thank you for allowing students the opportunity to travel halfway across the world, no matter the cultural or religious perspectives of each country. I think it was a great trip that reflected so much of how kids from different cultures and different religions come together, and we all have the same childhood. I got to experience Becky. She was my host, and I also co-hosted her when she came to Texas last year. It was such a great experience to let her meet my family and then go and meet hers. My favorite part of my China trip was getting to make traditional dumplings with her grandmother. It was the best thing ever. So thank you again for allowing us to have the opportunity to travel across the world.
Thank you.
My name's Jonathan. Just seeing these pictures up on the board, I'm right there, kind of takes me right back. It was an amazing experience. I enjoyed so much staying with my host family and just experiencing Chinese culture in general. It was fascinating seeing how similar they were to us, even though their general culture and lifestyle is different. Probably my favorite memory from it was just going to have dumplings and wonton noodle soup on a Sunday with my host student, and we just walked around the city for a little while. So I want to thank you so much for the opportunity, and I really enjoyed being able to go to China. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Luana. So I learn new things at every moment, from the language to the daily customs to the history. I can say with certainty that this experience has made me a new person. It changed my perspective of how we go about our lives. Only when you have the opportunity to be in a different country, living other people's lives by their side, can you truly learn what it's like to be part of a different culture. The way they did things and why they did them were not always the same as the way we do things, so to be able to learn from them allowed me to reconsider the way I lived my life and see meaning behind everything else I did. To be with the Chinese students up close and learn from them about their lifestyle and their culture while experiencing it myself was something that I will remember for the rest of my life, as well as the precious friendships and memories that I made. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for giving us this truly incredible experience.
Thank you.
Hello. I had the amazing experience of getting to travel for myself, but with a group of students, and one of those students was my son also. So it made it a very full experience. My daughter was able to do the trip 3 years ago, so I feel like it's kind of become this family thing to get to experience China. And I will say, personally, I'd never traveled to a communist country, and so I had all these misconceptions. And I was so overwhelmed, like emotionally overwhelmed with their hospitality and the way that they honor people and friendships, that it will definitely impact me for my whole life. So thank you so much for that experience.
Thank you.
At this time, the students are going to present you with a gift all the way from China. We hope you like jasmine tea. It's amazing. And again, thank you to the district and Dr. Randall. We know this was a big investment. We really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Yes, don't forget Mrs. Kay. And congratulations to all of you on such a successful trip.
And these young people, as well as our staff, they represented us well when they were visiting. So again, they make us proud as well. So thank you.
All right, let's move forward. Do we have any recognitions or awards tonight?
We do not.
How about any introductions?
We do not.
Okay, so now on to audience to the patrons.
Yes, Madam President. We do have a speaker this evening.
Okay.
We are now at the portion of the meeting where the board allows time to hear persons who desire to make comments to the board. Persons who wish to speak to the board must sign up to do so as they arrive, and they must indicate the topic about which they wish to speak. No presentation shall exceed 5 minutes. Delegations of more than 5 persons shall appoint one person to present their views. The board will hear the concerns, but the board cannot deliberate, discuss, or make a decision on any subject that is not posted on the agenda. Persons who speak to the board cannot complain about a district officer or employee in open session. Such concerns are heard in closed session after proper posting of the agenda item has occurred. And all speakers are asked to state their name and their address. Our first speaker is Alice Joshua.
Good evening to you all. My name is Alice Joswick. I live at 2708 Madison Avenue in Rosenberg, Texas. Thank you, Lamar CISD School Board and Dr. Randall, for allowing me to speak to you tonight. I appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. Randall, for the professional manner in which you handled the incident with Councilman Balderas in January of this year. You were reassuring to the taxpayers, to the citizens, and most importantly to the parents of the children attending the schools in Lamar CISD. I served on the Rosenberg City Council from June 2016 to June of 2018. And there were absolutely no discussions between the City of Rosenberg and Lamar CISD regarding the need for additional school resource officers. There was also no contentiousness between the two entities. The police chief, Dallas Warren, was a direct report to the City Council, and we would have been made aware of any additional needs of the Lamar CISD. I say all of this to make one point, especially to parents of the children in Lamar CISD. Your children have always been safe in their schools and will always be safe in their schools. I personally know many of these fine resource officers. Some attended Lamar CISD, some with my own children. They played sports together with my children, and have even spent time in my home. Some my husband even taught in his classes at Lamar CISD, perhaps at George Junior High or Lamar junior high, or even at Terry High School. You have the finest officers that the Rosenberg Police Department has to offer you. Their only goal is the safety of their children, because they do consider them their children. One of the best decisions you made was the hiring of Dallas Warren as your school safety coordinator. Having been his boss at the City of Rosenberg, I know him to be the most honest and honorable man I have ever worked with. He served in all his positions while in the Rosenberg Police Department with dignity and integrity. I have complete trust in all decisions that Dallas Warren makes. On behalf of myself, former Councilwoman Susan Uten, and also on behalf of former Councilwoman Lynn Moses, I say to you all, I am sorry to the school board and to Dr. Randall and to all the parents and students who were affected negatively by any statements made by Councilman Balderas. I wish you all the very best as you strive to provide for the well-being of all students in Lamar Consolidated Independent School District. And thank you, and God bless you all.
This concludes the audience. Okay.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move forward with the approval of the minutes. I need a motion to approve the January 14th, 2019 special meeting work 2020 should be there. 2020 special meeting workshop. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Mandy Bonzel makes the motion. Who seconds it?
Yeah, Mr. Hunt. Okay.
Oh, yes. Well, I'll go with that, Mr. Hunt. I'll get you next. Mr. Hunt seconds it. Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The motion passes. Yeah. All right. January 16th, 2020 regular board meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes? All right. Mr. Welch? A second? Okay. Ms. Williams? All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. The motion carries. All right, let's move forward to board reports. And at this time, if you've had a meeting or have you attended events, you may give us your report. So where do we want to start? You want to?
I attended the chat meeting, and I think we're going to have a report later this evening.
I'm not sure if that's today. It might not be.
No, it's not.
It's not today, but I'm sure the upcoming.
They
Okay.
attended to give us a presentation.
Okay.
In the near future.
Okay, good. Thank you. Mr. Hunt?
I attended the board facilities committee meeting on February 18th, and I have a brief update. The new maintenance and operations facility is waiting to close out with the service center, and that should be coming soon. Tamara Elementary School construction is underway and scheduled for completion in July 8th of this year. From the 2017 bond, Foster High School athletic improvements, including the dugouts, that project is closed out and final payment is on this board's agenda for this month. The ALC addition and renovations will begin summer of 2020, and the contractor recommendation should be on the April board meeting agenda. Jane Long historical gym renovations, the contractor recommendation will be on the board agenda for April. The transportation fuel tank replacement, the construction documents are being developed. It will begin May of 2020. Terry High School and George Junior High additions and renovations. Design development is scheduled for the March board meeting. Lamar Consolidated High School and Lamar Junior High School additions and renovations. The design development is scheduled for the March board meeting. Multi-campus carpet replacement is scheduled for summer of 2020. Multi-campus improvements and HVAC controls, that's going to start summer of 2020. The contractor recommendation will be on the April board meeting agenda. This building's exterior improvement, design development is in process. the multi-purpose spaces for the high schools and the orchestra additions for the middle schools. Design development is on the February board agenda. Construction should begin this summer. The facilities assessment and long-range plan and information will be presented at next month's board meeting. Randall High School and Harry Wright Junior High School construction is 40% complete and it's on schedule. And the trailer stadium press box construction is in progress and the project scheduled to be completed August of 2020.
Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know this time every month was time for us to give unofficial reports. And so because of that, I'd like to just mention two things that I've been out, two out in the district recently. One was I saw my first Lamar wrestling match at George Ranch High School versus Foster, and I didn't realize that there were female wrestling teams in the district, and so that's one of the reasons I go out. The other thing goes back 2 months to December, and I just wanted to give a shout out to the Transportation Department and Mr. Jones, who invited me to the Transportation Christmas Luncheon. And I got to eat lunch with him and some of the bus drivers, and then take a tour of the facility and see how all those folks organize logistics of all the different buses, not just to and from school every day, but the field trips and the other thing. So it was very interesting. I haven't made it to the Fulshire bus facility yet, but someday I might. So appreciate that invitation.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, I have just a couple of we're out and about, so I just want to thank again for being invited to the musicals at Terry, Fulshire, and Foster High School back in January. They never cease to amaze me. I think, as putting it what Kendra Willoughby said, they just don't turn into high school musicals, they turn into musicals. They are as professional and as enjoyable and exciting. And I thank the schools because they include the art department, the choir, the orchestras. It's a labor of love. The parent groups, they all pitch in, and it does show. And congratulations to those high schools that performed in January. I also got to come up here on February 11th and see the Rodeo Art Winners, which you can see out in the foyer. And again, those parents and the students, well, I think the parents were a little more excited, except for the little kindergartner that we couldn't get to sit still for a picture. But we have some amazing talent, and I hope the board and those of you here tonight have time to go out to the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo and see how well our students do. And it's always fun to find our children's artwork amongst all the other hundreds of artwork pieces from all the schools around Houston outside area. And last week we did have another safety and security meeting, and we had an excellent presentation at that time from Ms. Nelson about the measures she and her staff take to secure and keep safe all our teams, the fans, not just here in Lamar, but even when they go to other venues. So it's a very complex, and I don't know how they keep all the parts moving and keep it all done. And I asked her if it weren't, she shortened it just a little bit, if she at some point could do that presentation for the whole board. I think they would enjoy seeing it too. And just last, it's a shout out. I'm also a member of the Fort Bend County Retired Educators Association, and as of Tuesday, February 18th, we went over to Williams Elementary, and every year we donate books to pre-K through first grade. Every child gets a brand new book. They get to choose the book. We write their names in it. And those, well, first of all, congratulations on the remodeling of Williams. It does not look like it was a school built in 1985. It's gorgeous. But the students were so appreciative, and their manners and all the people that came that day were overwhelmed, and they said, wow, this is amazing. So, you know, we keep shining little bits across the district, and I just want to do a shout out to the people and all the staff and the students at Manford Williams Elementary. And that's all I have for tonight on that. So, okay, go ahead.
One more report. We've had an opportunity to have 3 of the community conversations events at Fulshire High School, Lamar Consolidated High School and Terry High School, and each event was even better attended than the last. And so I wanted to thank Joy Williams, the chair of the Family and Community Engagement Committee, for her leadership in helping to put that together, and all the parents and community members that came out, and all the people that work for the district that came out to the events. I know that it's a lot to come out to the events after a long day and a long week, but I think that the community really appreciated it, and I know that I appreciate it. And so thank you to all of you for coming out and helping it a success.
I agree, and I think it's great that the parents get to put a face on the names that they hear. Now they know kind of who we are. All right, Dr. Randall, do you have any reports this evening?
I do not, Madam President. I'm going to yield my time to the demographic update here in just a few minutes.
Okay. Well, what we're going to do is make a consent agenda, and after the consent agenda, we will go to the demographic update before we continue. All right, so let's just do a consent agenda at this time and pull what you would like for us to continue questioning or discussing. Action items go A1, A2, B1, B2, B3, and we'll come back and read those. B4, we'll come back and read that too. B5, B6, are we going to pull that for a presentation? Aren't we? Okay, so we're pulling B6. B7.
I'll pull B7.
Okay. B8.
I'd like to pull that.
Okay. B9. B10. B11. B12. B13. B14. B15. B16, B17, B18, B19, B20, B21, and C1. All right, I'm going to go back and read those so we make sure we have them. All right, it's goal A, 1 and 2, B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and C1. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Approve our consent agenda. Ms. Kaminsky? Oh.
I just had a clarification. The items that were pulled were 6, 7, and 8?
Yes. Is that correct? That's what I have.
Okay. All right.
Is that
sorry.
right?
Yeah, no, I was just clarifying.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. 6, 7, and 8 are the ones that we'll pull. Okay. We're good. We're all on the same page. All right. Ms. Kaminsky made the motion to accept the consent agenda. Do I have a second? Joe Hubenek? All right. All in favor say aye. Anyone opposed? The motion carries. All right. So now let's move forward with our presentation.
We will invite PASA to come up and update us on where we are in growth and their projections moving forward. Everyone has been waiting anxiously to hear from you all.
Well, now that you've yielded your time for us, I guess I'll be up here for a whole hour, huh? No, we all want to go home. Speaking on those terms, I was doing a little searching through our data before I got here. You guys are up to 160 residential developments or potential residential developments in this district alone. So this is the magnitude of growth in the area. It speaks for itself. But we'll talk about some of these. We can't talk about everything. I know you guys. There are about 3 new board members, correct? Since we were here last year. So we'll go over some of our methodology, and then of course if you have any questions afterward, we can answer those. But I will start us off here with just an update. I want to go over in our employment section some of this logistics warehousing boom we're going through. Some of you may have heard of a few things. There may be even more you haven't heard of. But that's starting to affect the district and employment in the area as well. In terms of housing, I'm going to go over a lot of new housing that's really starting to occur in South Rosenberg and even more in the future, and then in the 359 corridor. We're getting a clearer picture, finally, I believe, of some of our development in the Northwest, so north of Fulshire. We're really starting to hear from more developers, and they're really getting a better idea of when they're going to start breaking ground on some of their development. So I'm really happy about that. And then I can't stress this enough. The northern portion of Fort Bend ISD, if you think of Aliana, Harvest Green, those neighborhoods, building out rapidly. So within the next 4 to 5 years, a lot of those developments, almost all of them, will be completely built out. And so that's 1,000 home starts every year that are going to be migrating into this district. Our starter home builders, they're looking farther out. We'll get into a couple of those, but as I mentioned, all these warehousing and logistics developments, think about that. These are usually a little lower paying, lower wage jobs. And so starter home builders are really starting to look out toward communities farther west than ever before. And then Stacy will come up and we'll talk about timing of future campuses. But I always like to start off with our population chart here showing Fort Bend County. And this gray line, or gray chart, by the way, is every year, your annual population growth. The county grows by anywhere between 20 and 30,000 people a year. And right now, about 40% of those are occurring in this school district. But within 5 years, that build out of Fort Bend ISD, you're going to be probably over 60% of Fort Bend County's population growth will be in Lamar CISD. And it'll just keep going up from there. We always like to look at neighboring school districts and how you compare. We know that you're already at over 35,000 students, but we don't have data yet for all districts. So this is last year's, ranking you 14 in the metro area. You're likely next year going to be probably number 12. As you start surpassing these districts, within 3 to 5 years, you'll likely be in the top 10. This is 5-year growth from 2013 to 2018. You're now ranking number 3 in terms of 5-year absolute growth in the metro area out of 61 school districts. And in terms of the 44 districts that have over 30,000 students enrolled statewide, you're now ranking number 4 in terms of numeric growth. And this will change this next year, of course, because you grew by 1,700. Now, this chart, just kind of getting us a feeling as to where we are, is showing your grade groups. The blue lines are your elementary grades, and that's the annual change in enrollment at the elementary grade level. You can see how this line keeps trending upwards. You're now over 800 elementary students added this year alone compared to last school year. This continuing increase of younger students is really what's driving a lot of your growth. And of course, the housing is all due to that. But as long as you're seeing large increases in those young grades, you're going to continue seeing increased enrollment overall as they age through the system. And let's talk about that youngest cohort, the kindergarten population. So the blue line is your kindergarten enrollment, your actual kindergarten enrollment. And the orange line are your births. And it's very consistent going back all the way to 2004. You have about the same growth pattern between births and kindergarten. We're expecting kindergarten to continue to increase for the next few years. We did see a drop-off in births statewide, so we think in maybe 2 to 3 years you'll level out a bit. But because of that increased housing, it's not going to make that much of a difference. You'll continue to see added kindergarten students. We always talk about quality of life factors, and in your report you'll read about some of that if you never have before. But one of those big factors is your STAR passage rate at 82.6%. That's taking all of your tests, grades 3 through 8, and creating one metric, not looking at subsets of the population. So you're looking at yourself in the top 10% or top 10 districts with the highest enrollment in terms of STAR passage, which puts you at an advantage. Thus, home builders want to move here and start building here. Now, Charter schools are taking in a lot more students lately, but they still haven't made it all the way here to Lamar CISD in terms of having a really large impact on your district. So right now, your district is taking in about 95% of all pre-K through 12th grade students. That's pretty average, pretty high. You can see here that we're estimating charter schools and private schools, and then also transfers to nearby districts. All three of those categories are about 1.5 to 1.8%. So, for instance, charter schools are enrolling about 550 students who live here. We know of a couple of new charter schools opening farther east in the next year or two, but we don't believe they're going to have a dramatic increase in your student population enrolling into those schools. That's not to say that in the future, in the next 2 to 4 years, we won't see another one open up. We do know of one in particular seeking a new charter in the Richmond-Rosenberg area. We don't know if they're going to get the new charter, though. So the state usually only picks about 4 or 5 a year. So we'll see. I think they're up against 30. In terms of percentage of students in those charter schools, again, about 1.7%. But as you see, you actually are fairly low. You're ranking about the same as all the other school districts flanking the western suburbs. Your neighbors to the east, Fort Bend, are already up to 5% enrolling charter students in charter schools. Now, in terms of job growth, last year we saw about 90,000 jobs added in the metro area. This year, the Greater Houston Partnership is thinking it'll be about half that. Last year, they underprojected slightly, so we'll see what happens this year. But job growth has been slowing in recent months, and a lot of that has to do with the oil industry. They're just not hiring as much as they used to. But I did want to point out that warehouse boom that I mentioned earlier on. We cannot forget about this. So I've listed here a whole bunch of warehouses and logistics centers that are either under construction or had just finished, or some that are just about to start. And a couple I wanted to point out. Right here we've got a Ross Dress for Less sorting center opening up just north of the district. 1,300 jobs. Right at Woods Road in Kingsland, literally adjacent to the district boundary. That's a huge number of jobs in one particular area. I believe that should be open maybe later this year. Can't exactly remember. We have another large distribution center, Dollar Tree, moving into Rosenberg, the western part of Rosenberg. Another 300-400 jobs. An interesting one to me that I've recently learned about is the Southwest International Gateway. It's east of El Campo. So it's quite a bit ways outside of your district, but this year they're breaking ground on a spec warehouse as well as a corporation moving their distribution center from Laredo here. This region is fast becoming a hub for distribution that serves Houston, Austin, and San Antonio. So they can serve that 12 million population, booming to another, probably doubling that size in the coming 25, 30 years. So the western side of Houston continues to be a hub for logistics. You start getting all of these centers moving in here, that's a lot of jobs. And they're all going to have to live somewhere. And again, I did mention typically these warehouse jobs are a little lower wage, so your type of housing is going to start shifting. We're already seeing a lot of developers start really looking at homes on maybe 40 to 50 foot lots in this region, in the Fulshire region even, things we maybe wouldn't have even thought about 10 years ago. So the type of housing is slowly morphing as well to serve a broader range of people in the community. So in terms of housing, we have some really great maps over here that Mike's put behind the column, hiding from you all. But they're going to outline the entire district, and we map the entire district. We show you all parcels and new subdivisions coming online. We leave no stone unturned as best we can when researching who might be developing their land and what's coming up in the next 5 to 10 years. So those maps are going to be a great resource to you if you've never seen them before. And all of these developments are outlined in Chapter 2 of this report. I did want to go over a few of them, but I first wanted to start out with mentioning that you are now ranked number 2 in terms of housing starts for the Houston metro area. Second year in a row. Fort Bend ISD is still number 1 for now. I am pretty certain you will surpass them not too long from now. Because as I mentioned, by 2024, their entire new housing stock north of 98 will virtually be built out. So, in the first year of our projection period, today through October 2020, that's when our snapshot is taken. That's when all of our projections are finalized for October of every year. So it matches up with the TEA snapshot. I just wanted to point out a couple of developments happening. Up here in the north, a lot of the growth is being driven by some of these neighborhoods like Tamaron, building upwards of 200 homes a year. Talavera, in this coming year, will have another 120 homes occupied. That neighborhood just seemed to spring out of nowhere. Meritage is building it up there off 723. Right next door, Bellaterra West. And I don't want everyone to forget about some of our multifamily happening in the Longmeadow Farms area. We have 2 projects under construction right now. I believe one of them just finished. It's leasing up. Likely another 2 near Longmeadow Farms in the coming 5 years. So that's putting in another 150 units in the next year. And really close to Frost, in the Frost Elementary Zone, McCrary Meadows, that neighborhood is really booming. About 100 homes occupied every year. Farther south, we have others like Veranda with over 200 homes occupied every year. The thing with Veranda is we're not seeing the amount of students moving into these houses yet that we see in some other neighborhoods. Also, a few apartments in the town center area. Springs at Summer Park is a big one that just is wrapping up construction. So just know that you have one and maybe even another apartment coming online there as well. Looking at the 5-year projections, all these little red hot spots are where we're projecting the most new housing, and most of it is up in the north. We've been saying this for years. That's where all the new housing is going, and it's no surprise to us. We don't want to forget about the south, though. The difference between the south and the north is you don't have as many large master plan communities in the south part of the district. So you have a lot of different little small communities. But one new one that's popped up recently in Rosenberg is, I believe they're calling it Sendero, right off of Coblin Road. Also, Beasley has a couple of new developments by Signorelli. I believe this first one they're building is on acreage lots, but the second one that's moving into Beasley now is platted for 155 lots. They're calling it Tejas Village, right on the western side of Beasley. So we're starting to see some developers start moving into these very far-flung areas. We had a development in Needville ISD start this year right on the border of the district, but it was in Needville. So you're starting to see them pop up in places that we would have never suspected, 5-6 years ago. But now it's starting to happen. Farther north, you can expect 2 tracts to start development within the next 5 years. The Fulshire Lakes tract of 1,200 to 1,400 homes, and what we call the Rogers Road tract, just adjacent, likely to have about 900 single-family lots as well. The city of Fulshire is working on an in-city MUD with that developer. Cross Creek West. So we all know about Cross Creek, and by the way, Cross Creek is about to boom in this district. So far, the majority of the houses have been age-restricted in the Bonterra section. By about a year and a half from now, the KDISD side will be mostly built out. So all of those homes are going to start to be built in Lamar CISD, and they won't be age-restricted. Cross Creek West will be Johnson Development's newer development in the Fulshire area, along the eastern flank of 359. Expect home construction to start in about 2022. So I don't have a complete unit count for that. It's in flux. But the original plans were for 2,700 homes. It'll likely be higher than that now because that plan was about 6 years old. Looking forward, we project 10 years out. not knowing what's going to happen in some cases. But I have highlighted a couple of important tracts here. What we call the Darewood tract, it's about 1,100 acres along Bel Air. It's owned by Richfield. This is highly likely to start development, maybe even within the next 5 to 6 years. This developer has been selling off land to all these other communities piece by piece. There's another 1,600 acres here, just north of George Ranch High School. It's highly sought after. It's owned by a family with a couple of siblings, I believe. So a deal has not been made, but I can tell you there are several developers very, very interested in this 1,600 acres outside of the floodplain. Brentwood Farms, still on the books in the Pleak area for about 1,400 homes. Likely won't start in the next few years, but it could. And then one thing that we're keeping our eye on is some of the land of the 20,000 plus acres owned by the George Foundation. We have strong feelings now that they will slowly start selling some of their assets off in maybe, say, the next 5, 6 years. Once we see that happening, our projections will be beefed up even further. But it's likely to start happening closer to George Ranch High School or even new high school number 6, Randall High. So when we look at our projections the first 5 years in blue, compare them to the second 5 years of the projection period in orange, as you can see, as we've been telling you every year, you're going to start seeing single-family housing starts and occupancies increase. We don't want to forget all these other types of housing, but the truth is single-family is going to be what's driving your growth for the next decade, with over 50,000 homes projected. Now, we have to talk about how many students are living in these houses. And right now, district-wide, in single-family, you have 0.57 students per home, meaning for every 100 homes, 57 students in LCISD schools. For multifamily, you're at 0.4. It's always lower. The thing is, in this district, and this is not a surprise anywhere, really, every neighborhood's different. And so even though the average for every existing and active neighborhood is 0.57, that's not the case everywhere. Every neighborhood you see in blue actually has a ratio of below 0.4. In the reverse, every neighborhood you see in red has a ratio of 0.7 or higher. Just to point a few out, we haven't even talked about some of these neighborhoods. Stone Creek Estates in Rosenberg has almost 1 student per house. So even though they don't have as many homes being built, their ratio of students per home is very high. It's all due to the location. Everyone wants to live there because they like the schools, and I think they like the neighborhood. It's a great spot. So these are the kind of factors that can affect the student enrollment. So you can't always just look at housing. But when we take our moderate growth scenario and look at 10 years from now, it's dramatic. We're looking at just over 35,000 students now, but looking forward to about 2029-30, we could be talking about 60,000 students plus in this school district. So you can see here the next couple of years, your growth won't be that dramatic. You're already up to 1,700 numeric growth this year. We're projecting that a little higher for the next couple of years, but it's really about 23 when we start to see that jump. And a lot of that can be contributed to that build-out of Fort Bend ISD, that northern part. All of these new homes are going to have to start being built farther west if the population growth will continue, which we suspect it will. We also put a low and high growth scenario together for you new board members. This is the cone of uncertainty, essentially. We're at 35,000 right now. Within 5 years, we could be at about 46. Give or take a bit. And then that 10th year is where it really starts getting higher. A low growth scenario might mean the economy slows down, or a couple of really big charter schools move into the area, like IDEA. We know they want to expand. We know right now they're expanding on the north side of Houston. But what if they come here? So we have to kind of factor that in as well. It's a lot of unknowns. So with that, Stacy will come up and she'll talk about how all this is going to affect your actual enrollment at certain campuses and the growth.
Thank you. You've been very patient. You've heard a lot of information, and for you new board members, I know it's overwhelming. We have taken the information that you've heard from Justin and a lot more and rolled it into a model of how many students we project to live in every neighborhood every year for the next 10 years. And so that is geographically designated across the district. This is a hotspot map of our planning units showing in red the areas in which we project growth of more than 500 elementary students over the next 10 years. So it's similar to the hotspot maps that you saw for housing, except that this takes into account those changes in ratios in some neighborhoods, and as well as other factors influencing the student population, like the aging of the current student population and so forth. And so, of course, up in the north is the concentration of the hot spots, but you'll just notice that each of those planning units in red is more than 500 new elementary students. So in the north, up in the Huggins area and Lindsay and Tamaron, that's 3 planning units with more than 500 student growth, and 6 planning units in orange in that area with more than 200, between 200 and 600 or 500 student growth. So that just gives you a little bit of an overall perspective, but that certainly doesn't discount the rest of the district, because look at all the other orange planning units throughout the district, and that's between 200 and 500 new elementary students. But what's important to you as decision makers is how that relates to the attendance zones and where those kids would go to school. And so we've aggregated that into the attendance zones, and again, we have the red attendance zones are projected to gain more than 2,000 elementary students. Of course, that's Huggins. That's no surprise. In fact, Huggins is projected to gain 2,800 resident students in the next 10 years. And that doesn't count the students living in Lindsay and Tamaron. That's another 1,100 in Lindsay growth and almost 900 growth in Tamaron. So if you're just doing some mental math, each new elementary school is 750 students. So that gives you a ballpark of how many new elementary schools we might need up in the far northwest. However, and so I will walk you through in the next few steps where and when we recommend those schools will be needed. But for you new board members, we have some pretty specific criteria that we use in making these recommendations. So we're looking at utilization of the existing schools and when those schools are projected to exceed 120% threshold, 120% capacity, or about 900 students at the elementary level. And we use that 120% as just a general measure of that's in this district, it ends up being about 125% by the time the school is built and opened. But it's just a way for us to say this is getting too crowded, and we're looking at future growth coming behind it. And so that's our first flag that we need to look at a new school in that area. But most importantly, or equally importantly, we need to think about if we open a school that pulls only from a single school, we have to allow the first school to get crowd. If we opened a second school when that first school reaches 100%, then the next year we'd have 2 half-utilized schools, right? And that's not efficient. And so we have to allow the first school to get a little overcrowded so that we can have at least maybe 60% utilized schools, or 170% and 150 or 55%, but with a lot of potential for fast growth. So there's a lot of art rather than science in that balancing act. We also, it's really important, particularly in the case of the Northwest, and we've been saying this for years, that Huggins used to cover the entire Northwest area that includes Lindsay and Tamaron now. And so for years we've been saying we need to carve off pieces of Huggins in a structured and planned manner such that you're not moving the same students over and over and over again. And so we've already carved off the north with Lindsay and Tameron. And as we walk through the next steps, I'll show you how we carve off different pieces of the Huggins attendance zone in this effort to minimize moves. And then finally, all of these recommendations that I give you, we have considered and we have been in communication with Jared Fargo and the administration about where school sites, well, certainly where they're already owned, but where potentially good school sites might be located. And that's not something that I will discuss in this open session with you because it puts the district at a disadvantage for negotiating for these sites. But know that those discussions have been discussed and happened and will be shared with you in closed session. And we're not just willy-nilly saying, oh, there's a big open field, you should go put a school there, because there's no infrastructure, there's no access, it doesn't make any sense. So the recommendations that we make have specific areas in mind where a school might be purchased, but also in some cases, in most cases, there are multiple options. So with that being said, let's walk through the schedule. So the first step in these maps, look for the bright yellow. So those are the new catchment areas. That's another thing that I need to mention. If there is any press here, these are not attendance zones because nobody has decided when these schools will be built or if they will be built or where they will be built, and certainly not whose kids will attend them. So these are catchment areas. We have to draw an area and say this is how many kids are going to live in this area that could fill up a school if you could put a school here. No decisions have been made about attendance zones. So in yellow, we can see that in 2021, we can definitely utilize 2 new schools. One in the far northwest on the west side of Huggins, again, to carve off the western portion of the Huggins attendance zone, and another school in the east around the Grand Parkway in order to relieve overcrowding at Adolphus and primarily at Hubenek. With the new construction in Hubenek that seemingly came out of nowhere, that is it's becoming even more of an issue than Hubenek. Hubenek's always overcrowded, but particularly so a new school in general in the far northeast is also can be utilized as soon as it can get purchased and on the ground. The next step is in 2022, and I have 3 schools outlined here. I know that's a lot, and I know that probably won't really happen, but this is when the projections are driving the need. And so the one is here in the north. This is the Westheimer Lakes area, just south of Westheimer Lakes. You may recall used to be the Color Spot Nursery. We called it the Heinz Nursery. It's now been sold to Johnson Development, and they are putting houses there. And so in that area, that's all in Bentley, of course, and Bentley is projected to be overcrowded. So the Westheimer Lakes as well as the New Candela development could easily fill a school in 2022. Further south, this is the veranda site the district owns in order to carve off the northern part of the Arredondo site district zone, as well as the western part of the Hutchinson zone to relieve overcrowding in both of those. And then also in the far south, the district is considering a few different sites down there in order to relieve overcrowding in Culver and Meyer both. The next step in 2023 takes us back up to the north. Again, we're carving off more this time out of Lindsay in 2023. This is the Jordan Ranch site that the district owns already. In 2024, we can carve some more off of Huggins, off of the eastern side. That is Cross Creek and surrounding areas. And at that point, Justin mentioned how Cross Creek has the possibility for additional non-age restricted houses and is about to boom, and so that corresponds with the overcrowding at Huggins reaching a tipping point. And then finally, in 2026, we have 2 more needs. One of these would be, this is Cross Creek West along on the eastern side of 359 here. And as we are anticipating that to get going, that would support a new school, again, carving off of Huggins from the north portion, as well as somewhere here along, this is 723, along the eastern side of 723. This is the Darewood acreage that Justin talked about, the Richfield parcel. That is going to be overcrowding Bentley, as well as the McCreary Meadows that will be overcrowding Frost by that time. So, to summarize the elementary schools, starting in red and orange are the first 2 years of needs, and so sort of the first priorities, and followed by yellow, green, and finally blue being the furthest out as far as needs. But keep in mind that we do 10-year projections, and this is not the extent of the 10 years. So last year, when Justin first started on the first slide, he said that the developers in the Northwest have really narrowed down and solidified some of their plans compared to last year. And so last year I stood up here and told you need Tamaron and you need this Western school, and then you're going to need 4 or 5 others. But I can't tell you where, but you're going to need 4 or 5 others. And so now I'm telling you that the plans have solidified enough and the Jordan Ranch site has been purchased such that you still are going to need the same number of schools up there. It's just that 1 or 2 of them, we still don't know exactly where. They will be post-2026, and it will all depend on how things materialize up there. And the same in the south. By about 2025, Culver and this new school in 22, as well as Thomas here and Carter, will be reaching their overcrowding point. And so some of the small developments in that area would hopefully become good sites for an elementary school. So moving on to middle school and junior high, I will breeze through these because it's really more of the same. The overcrowding in the short term, of course, is in the south, and in both the Terry zone and the George Ranch zone, the middle school and junior highs associated with those, and in the long term up in the north. These tables show highlighted the year in which each of these schools is projected to reach that 120% threshold. So, of course, the opening of Wright Junior High will relieve the overcrowding in the south in the short term. At the high school level, of course, the Terry and George Ranch is driving the need for Randall High School, but also Terry will be reaching its capacity, its 120% threshold soon thereafter. But importantly, so Randall High School is 40% underway, finished, and I know that is your focus right now. But my focus is long term, and I know it feels like we just opened Fulshear High School, but it's time to start thinking about another site in the north, because Fulshear and Foster are both projected to have over 2,500 students by 2023. That's not very long away, and so it's time to start thinking about how those northern high schools can be relieved by yet another high school complex. And so this illustrates what I just said, that George Ranch is driving the overcrowding need for Randall High School in the south, but in 2023, Fulshear and Foster will both be bumping up on that threshold for needing some additional space. So with that, we can answer any questions. Not quite an hour, Dr. Randall.
It's a lot to digest.
It is.
All those are in here somewhere.
Yes. Okay. The slides that I presented are in the last 2 chapters, last planning chapters. The bulk of the housing is in Chapter 2 that Justin talked about. Thanks.
And it'll also be uploaded to the website.
Great, thank you. Is there any questions?
It's a lot to digest there.
Yeah, it's getting tough to keep track in this district. It really is.
We're just so popular.
And big. Large.
There's no other questions or comments? Thank you so much. You've given us something to sleep on tonight, or not. You. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Some light reading later. All right, let's go back to, I tell you what, let's move on to reading the donations. Oh, no, let's do the resolutions. We have Diagnosticians Week, page 29. Who's going to? Okay. Go ahead.
Whereas Diagnosticians Week has historically been proclaimed by the governor of Texas to be recognized throughout Texas during the first full week of March, and whereas diagnosticians in Texas play an important role in the educational, social, and emotional development of our children, and whereas diagnosticians use specialized training to identify learning disabilities and recommend appropriate special education intervention for students, and whereas diagnosticians are in a unique position to consult with professionals in other fields when speech, physical, medical, and emotional problems are indicated, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Lamar Consolidated Independent School District declares March 2nd through 6th, 2020 as Texas Educational Diagnosticians Week in the Lamar Consolidated Independent School District, and ask our community to recognize the invaluable contributions made by educational diagnosticians.
Texas Public School Week.
Whereas the students of our Texas public schools hold the promise of our future in their capable hands, and whereas the Lamar Consolidated Independent School District provides the tools, framework, and solid foundation vital for the future of our children, and whereas the dedicated efforts of parents, educators, and community leaders provide the necessary support and strength to our schools, thus providing our children a quality education, and whereas students attain a higher level of achievement because of the commitment to excellence and focus on continued improvement in our schools, and whereas for more than 60 years the observance of Texas Public Schools Week has demonstrated the significant impact of education on our futures and our communities. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Lamar Consolidated Independent School District encourages all citizens to reaffirm their commitment to public schools during Texas Public Schools Week, March 2nd through 6th, 2020, and urges all citizens recognize the impact public education has had in raising past, present, and future generations of Texans.
And the
Yes, a question about that.
Okay.
It says parents and community members are invited into the classrooms of Lamar CISD to watch learners in action and the educational process work related to that. What does that mean exactly? How does that work?
Many times the schools will have activities or they'll reach out, but during that week you can go in and sometimes they have specific activities going on in the different classrooms.
That's correct.
Okay.
And so that'll be relayed from...
It's probably on everyone's
per
website,
campus?
and I'm sure the students are bringing home information on that as we speak. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we had one donation this week. Frost PTO donated $5,145 to purchase math mastery workbooks for the Frost Elementary School, and we thank their Frost PTO for that. Okay, so let's go back now to the pulled agenda items. Did you have something else?
No, I was going to get started on that.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
The agenda item is that we ask the board to approve the 2019-20 Attendance Boundary Committee recommendation to establish the attendance boundary area for Tamaron Elementary and to allow grandfathering of fifth grade students for the 2021 school year. And we have a presentation from the committee and chair.
Yes, good evening, everyone. As Dr. Randall mentioned, tonight we will have the recommendation for the Tameron ABC. I would like to point out that we do have members of the Tameron ABC in the audience, and at this time we would like to ask that they stand and that we recognize them for their service. Additionally, we do have Robert Quiros, who is the spokesperson from the Tameron ABC, and he will give an overview. If you have any additional questions about the process, I will be standing by as well.
Thank you. My name is Robert Quiros. I have two 13-year-olds that attend Lehman Junior High, so thank you for the opportunity to do this. So getting right into this, doing the attendance board, boundary committee, let's find an opportunity to volunteer for something that actually can help to the community. So my kids were the first class, among the front class of the fifth graders there at Lindsay Elementary. So seeing the community grow and having a development to that, it's pretty interesting to see how all these demographics and all that's impacted. But a lot of this for the committee that we came in there, a lot of us had to learn the process and see, okay, what are we trying to accomplish and what is the goal for those things? So understand the data, understand what the timeline and the ultimate goal for us as among as the committee was a huge task to say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish here? So the staff was able to provide us with all that information to say how is best to fit this community. So we took all that information, we provided our own questions and said, okay, how is this going to affect the community? So we convened on that first meeting. We returned on January 13 to see if we had any posed questions, had an ability to say, this is what I thought over, and we reviewed and requested the information and discussed the options. Being that the zone is toward the top of the school district, there was not a lot that you had to debate as far as where the boundary lines were. So the members selected a recommendation, and then we would present that to the public. So on the January 30th public meeting, which was held at Lindsay Elementary, which is great because my house is just down the street. The members of the public were invited to speak. They were invited to have comments, questions on the actual presentation, that was being proposed. During the meeting, there was not any initial questions. There was no Q&A, but afterwards, there was some members of the community that asked questions. They were asking mainly transportation, some of the things about maybe some grandfathering. We took that information, met up next week, the following week on February 3rd, and took that input and said, was there anything of majority significance to be able to contribute to this, to say, is there enough to change what was being proposed as far as those boundaries? So we discussed it. All the members voted on the final recommendations to present to y'all. There were no boundary line changes, the public input, from the public input, so we looked at that and said, this is what the best approach. One of the big recommendations that did get discussed was the grandfathering of those fifth grade students, those ones that were going to be impacted the most of those incoming fifth graders. So here's the layout of that boundary of where that line would fit. Lindsay Elementary being at the top, Tameron, the new elementary, being at the bottom, right there, ending at the Tameron Parkway, and trying to seek out that 60% as the demographers spoke to, and trying to hit that 750 for the elementary. So Lindsay Elementary looks to still be well utilized, and Tameron's moving into that zone where y'all were seeking for that 60% target. So ultimately, what was the rationale? We were trying to keep the neighborhoods together, the community, those families, those communities that live together, and being able to make it to where it's the best reasonable. So you want to accommodate growth, you want to minimize the impacts for those children that are going to be moving, those students that potentially could be rezoned, all the points that the demographer made. We don't want a lot of that shifting. So with that natural boundary line, ultimately provide that relief to Lindsay Elementary and be able to provide a good placement for all those students within that community. So, any questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, are there any questions?
Or do we need to go ahead and make the motion now? We can still ask questions.
We can make the motion.
Okay. Could I have a motion to accept the attendance boundary committee's recommendation to establish the attendance boundary area for Tameron Elementary and allow the grandfathering of fifth grade students for the 2021 school year as presented? You want to make that motion, Mr. Hunt? Who would like to
I will
second
second
it?
that
You'll
motion.
second it, Mr. Welch. All right, do now discussion.
I appreciate the committee. I was able to attend the meetings and they asked extremely thoughtful questions. I appreciate their service in coming out to the meetings and consuming all of the PASA data that we just got, and they got a version of that as well as they were considering this. And thank you to the administration for allowing the meetings to be at Lindsay Elementary, so it was convenient for families to come. I just had one thing to consider on the motion. So the ABC committee recommended grandfathering the 5th grade students. So one of the questions that I asked the administration was those students that would be going to Tameron, they're all in the Tameron subdivision. There's some students that are in 3rd grade now that went to Huggins, and then they went to Lindsay, and then they would be zoned for 4th grade to go to Tameron Elementary. So that means that there would be 3 moves for them. So my suggestion would be to also grandfather that particular subset of students. It was a total of 11 students. So it won't in any way impact overcrowding or anything at Lindsay. I don't believe that there's any concerns from the Lindsay administration on that. So I just think it makes sense to not have elementary school students go to 3 schools if at all possible.
Would they still be able to get transportation, or would they have to provide their own?
No.
So for grandfathering, similar to our 5th grade students, those students would provide their own transportation, but it appears that Mr. Hunt's recommending is that those individuals that have been to 3 schools would be afforded the same grandfathering rules as the 5th grade students.
I just wanted to make sure the same grandfathering rules for the 5th graders, the same for these.
Mr. Hunt, have you heard from parents that are requesting that?
I have. And from my conversations with them, I think that some of them would take advantage of it. Some might not. Some of them like the opportunity to open a new school, but I think it makes sense to afford them the opportunity to not have their child have to go to 3 schools within 4 years, especially if it's not going to impact Lindsay Elementary.
So do we need to make a amendment to the motion? Someone?
So
Okay.
I would move to amend the motion to also grandfather incoming 4th grade students that would be zoned to Tameron Elementary, but that attended Huggins Elementary in the past.
Is it a specific, can I ask, is it a very specific area? Are they all coming from about the same area?
Well, when the students that went to Huggins basically moved into Tameron when it was in its infancy.
Okay. All right. Okay, so there's been an amendment to.
We need a second.
A second. We need a second.
I'll second it.
You'll second it? Amanda. Okay, Ms. Ponce. All right, so we need to vote on the amendment. All right, if there are no other questions or comments, let's vote on the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Same sign. So the amendment passes. Now, we're going to now vote on the
amended motion, which includes the original motion plus now including.
All right, so now we have the original.
You can just say amended motion.
Amended motion. Okay, now we have the amendment, because that's a lot of words to say. All right, so now we're voting on the amended motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The motion passes. Okay. Thank you. And thank you again to all those that worked on that ABC committee for Tameron. All right, we're moving forward to the next. B7 is the consider approval of the resolution of Lamar CISD School District to create a police department and provide the superintendent of schools with the authority to file the necessary documents. So,
I'll make the motion.
Make a motion. We have Ms. Kaminsky making a motion. Second, Mr. Welch. Discussion.
The one thing I would point out is that at your table, we had a word missing. Number 2, the second sentence. On the resolution that you received Tuesday, it said on law enforcement carry weapons, but we needed to put 2 carry weapons in there, so you have that correction.
Thank you. All right, is there any?
Yeah, I pulled this item because I think this is a major event, and I think that the gravity of this vote deserves its own vote instead of it being clustered and bundled with everything else. And I just wanted to go on the record to say I like good guys with guns protecting the rest of us, and I'm always going to be supporting the police department as much as possible, because if we don't have a proper security, academics don't matter. And all these other things that we do don't matter. And so I'm excited to cast a vote going forward.
Any other questions or discussion? All right. None. We will vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. The motion passes.
Madam Chairman, with the passage of the resolution, one of the requirements of establishing a police department, you have to pass the resolution and name a police chief. I'm appointing Dallas Warren as interim police chief to assist with the establishment of the police force until we post, interview, and recommend to the board a police chief. This does not change the order in which things will operate. You've got Chief White and existing department working here, and then you have the staff along with a interim chief working on the establishment of the police department.
Thank you. So let's move. We also had pulled, I believe, B8, that the Board of Trustees authorize the superintendent to execute a retail sales interlock agreement of electricity with the TASB Energy Cooperative beginning June 1st, 2023. May I have a motion?
Make a motion.
Mr. Welch makes the motion. Do I have a second? Ms. Kaminsky seconds it. All right, now discussion or question?
Yes.
We have staff.
Okay.
So I sent you an email on this today, but so I received 2 emails from 2 different parties asking that we consider delaying this vote. So my question is, what consideration did we give to the Van Brunt and Associates, the TPEA, or TIPS that might help us in securing a competitive market?
That's a good question. One of the things that we always want to do is make sure that we're exploring our options, especially in terms of energy providers. We did have a series of conversations with TASB and their energy cooperative. I've asked Ms. Stephanie Ferreira to be here representing TASB. She can give you an idea of what that process is as they went out for an RFQ.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to come and speak to you on behalf of TASB. So what TASB did is we sent out a bid, an RFQ. It's a 6-month-long process to all the retail providers of electricity. When the bids came in, we scored them, and then we interviewed each vendor individually and scored them as well. The people that we recommended, we went to the board, which is our board members, and they voted unanimously with Direct Energy. We based it on, we wanted a very specific contract that will benefit school districts. TASB is pro schools, and everything we do is for school districts. So what was super important to us is that you can add and delete schools without being penalized for that. So and based on your growth, you're going to be adding a lot of schools. So 3 years from now, you add a school, you can either, if the market rate is lower, you can use that rate, or if it's higher, you get the rate that you will be getting now. The other thing that we wanted was there's no swing, meaning whether you use a lot of electricity or you use a little bit of electricity, it is the same, and you're not penalized for anything like that. And the other benefit is the backing of TASB. And I can tell you, we also have a fuel program, and when Harvey hit, these fuel providers charged exorbitant delivery fees for the fuel. Our members that had purchased the fuel program through us, we were able to go to battle for them, and we got all of their fuel charges refunded. So any issues that you could possibly have with your electricity or with DE, TASB will back you 100% with that. And but we did do a big bid process for that. And the other thing that you can do, we also do a power buy that you can do through Direct Energy. So if you want to be use wholesale buyers, wholesale vendors that come in, 7 to 9 providers come in, you can be, it's very transparent. You can sit there and watch what they bid you on your rate, and you pick the lowest rate possible. And we have a lot of districts that do that as well. So
when they say that these emails made me feel like these companies, and maybe that I'm reading this wrong, but they did not have a chance to bid.
they did.
So they did have a chance.
A lot of them did not want to follow our contract, which is being able to add new schools and have the rate that you can the lower rate possible. So that was a big thing. And the other thing, these are brokers that you're dealing with. So it's very different. Van Brunt is a broker, so they have a bunch of different providers.
Right, and that's what they said. Okay. And then how about TXU?
TXU was also involved, and they did not want to sign an exclusive with TASB. So that's why because we have a very specific contract, and they did not want that specific contract. Our contract is designed for what is best for the school district. And
Chris could speak to a couple of things that some of these companies will talk about, like rebates and those types of things. And Chris, can you speak to a couple of those? I think
you see what I call the big check moment, where they write a check to the district that has the name of the district on it, and a fairly large amount sometimes. There's a lot of strings that are tied to that you can't see in that picture moment. And some of the things that are required to get that money, we already do. For example, the demand response that we do through CenterPoint Energy, that's something that's touted by some of those providers. We already do that. And I want to reiterate a couple of things that Stephanie talked about that are really important. And you just heard our demographers. A fast growth district, it is an amazing opportunity for us, one, to lock in. The rate is very competitive. We're at historic lows right now. To lock that rate in, and as we bring on new sites, this will begin in 2023 and go for a period of 96 months, 8 years. As we bring on those schools that you saw, there's two options, and I want to reiterate that again. We either bring them in at the rate that we're signing this contract for, in the low 3 cents per kWh, or say in 2026 the rate has doubled. We get to bring our schools in at the rate we've agreed upon. That's still that same rate that we would agree to now. If the rates move the other way and it's lower than the agreed upon rate, we get to bring our schools in at that lower rate. So this really is a win-win for a fast growth district. And we really looked at that as we had conversations with TASB. For our type of district, it really pays significant benefits over time. And we broke that out. Again, these rates move in 4-hour blocks of time. So that's why we can't quote exactly what it'll be by tomorrow, but it'll be very similar. But we want to lock those rates in because we are starting to see a slow uptick. And our math person, Jill, did the math. And for every 1/10 of a cent that rate rises, that is a negative $75,000 loss to the district. So if you wait and rates trend up, for each 1/10 of a cent, it costs us $75,000. So that's a big number to look at. So I just wanted to be clear on those things.
The rate could trend down. It's all about when you lock in.
Any other questions or comments at this time?
Ms. Williams, do you feel like we've answered your
Yes,
question?
thank you very much.
And I have to say that ability to add schools in, that is.
And of course, that's not in the emails that I get, but.
Right. That was a very important thing that we wanted in the contract because your demographics change. And even some schools, their demographics shrink and they have to eliminate schools. And so that was a huge point in our contract.
Thank you for the work.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Are you ready to vote? All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. The motion passes. All right. I think we've completed all the action items, Dr. Randall.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have any other information items we need to visit?
No, ma'am.
All right.
Oh, well, not me. I don't have any more. The board may have some questions. I'm sorry.
But there's no more presentations tonight. So
Right.
did
Yes,
you need
ma'am.
to visit one of the action items, the information items?
One current information.
Current information items that was in our board book right now. All right. Do we have to go?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So we will at 8:26 adjourn to closed session for pursuant of Texas Government Code Sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.082, the Opens Meeting Act. We have personnel, line acquisitions, or consultation with our attorney. All right. Closed session. All right. We are back from closed session at 8:36, and we have nothing to do from closed session. All right. At this time, are there any future agenda items that you would like to put on the March agenda? Yes.
I would like an information item from the administration's perspective on the pros and cons of possibly changing the board meeting, workshop, and meetings going forward. I know that there is at least one neighboring district that holds their workshops one week and their meeting the following week. We do everything in 2 days, and it's a lot to digest. So before I pull my fellow board members' opinions on that, I would like to know the pros and cons of possibly either changing to that or experimenting with that from the administration perspective.
For the coming year.
Yes. And maybe like a little factoid of how long it's been in this current pattern that we've had. You know, has it been the last 5 years? Has it been the last 10 years we've been doing this? Or?
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else? Yes.
I have a couple, 3 of them. I wanted to see, I spoke with Mr. Rockwood about that. I wanted to get an update on our canvas usage per campus, or however the best way to report on that. That aligns with our 2019 SMART goal number 2. And then as far as Naviance goes, went to a presentation. Mr. Lutz was there the other night as well. And I wanted to find out, get some information on the cost to the district if we allowed non-enrolled tax-paying families in the district to be to have the use of the Naviance system, where they get the free the SAT prep test in college information.
And that's as an information item?
Yes.
Okay. You said you had one more?
And then my third one was I wanted to see if we're still following up on the school bus advertisements. I know that we were going to check into getting further details on that. So I wanted to get an update on that.
So the SMART goal number 2, ambiance, and update on bus advertising. Thank you. Anything else? All right, I'm just going to do a couple of real quick of meetings and events. I think we had a update put on your desk of all the playoff games that are coming up. Thank you, Ms. Nelson. And Saturday night, Men Who Cook. I bet there's a lot of men in here that are about ready to go home and start cooking, right? And I hope that if you don't have a ticket, I'm sure Janice Knight will find you a way to get there. We have 2 more of our community conversation series, February 27th, George Ranch High School, and March 2nd, Foster High School at 6:30. And like you said earlier, Mr. Hunt, they've been well attended. As each one goes, they get bigger and bigger. So let's see how it can go off with a bang on the last 2. All right, any other thing we need to report? If not, it is 8:40 and our meeting is adjourned.